In a world filled with sharks, bears, and killer bees, one man is brave enough to stay indoors to bring you the latest in gaming, movie, and pop culture news. That man is Tom Awesome, and this is the Outside is Overrated podcast.
Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated, a grown-up podcast about gaming and nerd pop culture. On this show, we discuss video games, books, TV shows, movies, and board games. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Tom Sedlacek, and we've got a great show lined up for you. Last month, we started a mech-based discussion by breaking down the animated film Macross, Do You Remember Love? 2 weeks ago, we published the first part of our Game Club discussion on Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. And now, today on this podcast, we're tackling mechs on the digital tabletop with a discussion of Psy, Digital Edition by the Knights of Unity. Joining me for the discussion today are the Mean Man, Hobbybox Joe Burns.
Heyo.
And the director of crying at a technology firm, John Munch.
Howdy, howdy, everybody.
Welcome back to the show, guys. Burns, you weren't even supposed to be here today. Have you learned that there are no breaks from the ever-turning wheel of Outside is Overrated?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to learn that. It's just like that famous movie line, just when you think you get out, they suck you back in.
I was thinking...
From one of the Godfather movies, I believe, but yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of Dante, I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Well, no, I got that reference. I was following up with another movie reference. So.
Yeah, well, those are all the movies I've ever seen, so that's all I got.
And John, you got show notes in.
Yeah, you wrote a thing.
I did. It's OIO all the time. I just wrote this in there right now.
Oh, okay. See, you succeeded.
I did. See, I added some stuff to my show notes, but it's all OIO all the time. That's all we do, right? Everything else is secondary to this.
Yeah, that and played virtual board games, which we'll get into more in a moment.
I mean, it is crazy, though. I think since I started being on Game Pass Forever, which turned into Game Club, I think the Armored Core 6 is the first episode I haven't been on since I started doing that.
Now,
so
you haven't fallen in love with Diablo and you're not just going to drop off that segment forever now, are you?
No. That's not me. That's somebody else that's a part of this podcast. Though really, it's on us because we're not choosing games that are on Game Pass. Otherwise, he would be in supposedly.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I think he's got one love now, and I don't know. Welcome to Game Club Forever, John. You're the new Casey.
Right.
You're our new best friend.
I am. I have to learn some thumb techniques, I guess.
Yeah.
And how to hold my controller with my feet.
Or you just have to have something as equally meme worthy that you can do. That is unique to you, you know.
True. I don't know if I want to be known as. I don't want to be known as the chocolate thumb guy, so I think we'll switch it up.
You know, I mean, for a while, it was all about the Batwing for me. Like the first year I was on the podcast, so
yeah. Well, we like to focus on different body parts, and
that's right.
Oh, it's pretty much the same region. It's not really very different.
Yeah, John, you're gonna be like our thigh guy or what?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll do biceps, something weird, or triceps, back of the neck. Who knows?
Yeah, we love our
Grundle. John the Grundle Munch. I don't know. That's bad. Let's not go with that.
Let's not go with that. No.
The Grundle Munch.
This is what happens when we record it early, everyone. So
yeah, it's gonna be.
And that's not an actual swear, so Tom doesn't have to bleep it out because kids won't know what a grundle is.
Yeah, I don't even know what a grundle is.
They're gonna Google it, and parent alerts everywhere are gonna be like, "What? Oh, I don't even know what a grundle is. I'm not Googling it."
I'm totally going to Google it. But off the grundles, back to the show. Thank you to our sponsor, Premier Health. Check out their website, Premier Health, MN as in Minnesota.com. That's Premier Health, MN as in Minnesota.com. If you enjoy this content, please support the show at patreon.com/OIO. You can also follow us on social. Email the show at overratedpod@gmail.com. Follow Burns at HobbyboxBurns on X and twitch.tv/HobbyboxBurns. Follow me at Tom Sedlacek OIO and follow the show at facebook.com/OutsideIsOverrated.
Big things about to be happening. Twitch.tv/HobbyboxBurns.
Oh yeah? Right. Do you have a plan for streaming something?
I just felt like throwing that out there.
Oh, yeah, big things. Yeah. So we're going to start by discussing Scythe, the digital board game, with a word that I'm going to mispronounce 100 million billion times over the episode, so get ready to drink, everyone. Fans of the show may recall that we covered the board game Scythe during episode 26 on Stonemaier Games nearly 5 years ago. And our focus on our discussion today is going to be mainly on the mechs within Scythe, since we've already talked about this game. But as a refresher, Scythe is an asymmetric engine-building board game set in an alternate history 1920s, where massive mechs patrol the war-torn landscape of Europa. Players take on the roles of rival factions, expanding their territory, managing resources, and strategically deploying mechs to assert dominance. While combat is an option, the game emphasizes economic growth, strategic planning, and player-driven interactions. In this episode, we played the PC adaptation by the Knights of Unity, which streamlines gameplay and brings the Dieselpunk world to life digitally. John, as I was putting the show together, working on the framework for our mech shows, you chose Scythe as the topic you wanted to champion for this episode. Why did you think the digital version of the board game was a good fit for our audience?
Well, I mean, it does have giant mechs right on the cover, right on the box. So I was like, oh, that will fit, right? And even like as you describe the game, right, it makes it sound like, oh, this is going to be focused on the mechs. The mechs are going to have this massive impact on the game. It's where it is. Like, you know, it's funny. It's a little bit of a bait and switch with it, as we'll talk about as we move forward. But like, it's not necessarily the main focus. They're still such a huge part of the game. But it's really cool how, you know, they're a huge part, but not in the way you normally see mechs and everything else. So while like I was thinking it's going to be, yeah, we're going to like get into some really cool mech battles with these steampunk mechs and like, you know, fake Russia, fake Poland. It turns out that kind of wasn't like that, but there's still a really cool like impact from these like interesting game mechanics.
And to go back for a second to Tom's lead into this, it was episode 26 where we talked about Stonemaier Games, and released on July 5th, 2020. So it has been almost 5 years, like you said, which is crazy to me, because it seems like it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that this is the connection to talk about this, but I think it's a fun conversation to have, going at how this game plays. We talked about it as a board game in that episode, but now how is that represented in a digital media? And I think it's really fascinating to see the decisions that developers make to try to represent as much of it, or how to represent something that's physically on a board that you interact with, digitally, so that you can see the information that you would see there, which is kind of neat. It's a neat problem when you think about it from like a design space for a game or an app or something like that.
I was super excited when you chose this game, John, because Scythe is my favorite board game, and I'm like, all right, more Scythe, more opportunity to play Scythe with more players. Great, I'm all in. Well, this episode will serve as a lesson. Mechs can serve very different narrative and thematic roles across media. In last month's episode, the mechs were agile, high-tech war machines integrated into a character-driven sci-fi story, emphasizing aerial combat, transformation, and emotional stakes. Inside, the mechs are industrial war machines that reinforce the game's dieselpunk aesthetic, acting as strategic tools for territory control, resource management, and intimidation rather than fast-paced combat. So, Joey, how do these differences impact the aesthetic of the game, and how does it affect the gameplay and the strategy?
Yeah, because like you said, it's a very different representation of mechs than if you were looking at it from the typical Japanese manga animation aesthetic. Instead of being, you know, these tanks are basically these mobile flying tanks that can destroy like all sorts of things. Basically, they're much more useful in Scythe as buses or semi-trucks to ferry your workers around. They can fight if you need them to, and they're also a deterrent, but ultimately the most useful aspect of them are the movement abilities they unlock and being able to get your workers to more advantageous places.
And I just want to share my anecdote of the very first time we played Scythe. You brought it over, you open the box, each faction has these 4 cool mechs, and it's like, oh, these are awesome. And I'm like, I'm going to get these out, and I'm going to wreak havoc on my opponents. And so I did whatever I had to get the first mech on the board. I'm like, all right, now how do I destroy everyone? And you're like, cool. You can move your workers. Like, that's it?
Yep.
Yeah, that was
Yep.
pretty much it.
Especially early on.
Yeah, and I kind of had the same idea, right? Again, like, this game takes something that is so ingrained to me, like mechs mean giant robot fights, right? Oh, this is going to be Pacific Rim, or, you know, and we talked about another one like Robot Jocks or something, but like, you know, a steampunk version in Poland, and like not what it is at all. I do think, you know, my favorite aspect about like the mechs in the game that I found is the ability unlock functionality, right? Because that to me is where the true strategy comes in with it. And if you look at the theming of it, of like, yeah, what these are these are just the big machines that each one of these, you know, countries are building to help their workers work, right? You get really cool abilities like, oh, hey, I can cross rivers, or when I do battle, I can, like, you know, have artillery strikes that like let me attack a little bit first. So like there's some cool strategy with like movement, with how you do combat, right? How you collect and move resources, right? That is tied in that you don't see in other kind of mech based gameplay.
Yeah, and I think going back to like the aesthetic that Tom was mentioning, so like the whole setting of Scythe is that it's basically an alternate reality World War One, where World War One I think either started, but then someone found the factory, which had this all of this technology within it that led to this sort of burst of technology. And so this ability to track down the technology and how that got out into the world kind of superseded World War One. And so all these factions that were a part of leading up to that war instead sort of focus more on the economic and technological advancement. And then the game sort of represents that, of all the factions trying to get to the center of the board, get the factory, and then if you hold the factory, it's worth more at the end of the game. And then when you look at it from an aesthetic specific standpoint, and Tom, you mentioned, I think that's what they've used as the diesel punk aesthetic of it. I mean, the miniatures all look really cool, and they do a great job in the game of representing those in there and allowing you to turn on a painting feature so that you could see like what they would actually look like if they were a little bit more realistic. They still look like, you know, they still aren't like, it's not like a fantastic paint job, and it's not like it turns it into like a digital moving mech or anything. It's still just a board game piece, but it still looks really cool and adds just extra flavor to it.
And one thing that Stonemaier Games did with the original property with the board game is each faction's mechs look unique, and that carries over into the digital edition as well. And when you add on the painting, it really gives them a unique feel to each faction's mechs.
Yeah, and I can't remember if we talked about it in the Stonemaier episode, but like the whole idea was Jamie Stegmaier had the game idea for a while and then stumbled across the art of Jakub Rosalski, who before the game even was a thing, was creating this sort of like diesel punk aesthetic of like these mechs, and then surrounded by basically just these like peasants that are working in the fields and like doing, not necessarily having these crazy fights, but it's like just like a slice of life type of thing. And he loved that aesthetic so much that he was like, let's make this the center of this game and the setting of it, which I think is also a really neat thing. And then he paid him for the art and to make new art specifically for the game. And so I think that's also kind of a really cool story to set the stage for what we'll be talking about.
Yeah, it's an awesome art style, and it fits perfectly with the aesthetic of the game. Scythe is pretty unique in how it incorporates mechs without making them like the core central main mechanic. Mechs are powerful units that improve movement, enable combat, and grant faction abilities, but the game is primarily about your economy, area control, and engine building rather than mech warfare. So unlike many mech-focused games, combat is not the dominant strategy. Players can win without engaging in a single battle. So John, did the presence of mechs make conflict feel inevitable, or did they function more as deterrents?
My opinion on this changed as I played the game and I kind of started to understand the model. Like initially, I was like, I got to get a mech out. I don't have any protection, right? I felt very, very vulnerable. And then as soon as I realized, like, oh, actually, that's kind of how everyone feels, right? Like having your mechs really, to me, is like getting my mech out is not about like, I'm going to go beat somebody up, right? It's really about, I just need to make sure that someone just can't just take my stuff like by just walking, right? Because I think a key thing that we need to talk about is like how the combat will work, right? So if I have a mech or my main, you have like your main like character control, like your big bear unit or whatever, that's like basically you, right? They can walk into any territory that's owned by an opponent and just take it if there's just like a little peon worker on there. Now you lose popularity when you do that, right? So it's a risk reward, but if there is a mech on there, then you have to do combat. So it's more in like, I need to get this mech out so that I can either move a big chunk of units because I want to move to a new resource, or the main thing for me is like, oh, I see that Tom is directly to the south of me, right? And his character has Riverwalk, and now I'm vulnerable. So if I want to continue to build this resource in this spot, I either need to plan that I'm going to like use the resource in the same turn, or I have to have a mech there so that I can store those resources with a little bit of protection to make Tom think twice about, moving in and just taking my stuff. Because, I mean, if I was Tom, I would just take my stuff that's sitting there because I've done that.
I'd say it's kind of the Tom specialty. Like, that is the primary thing that I watch the board for. Like, if somebody leaves a big stack of resources without any protection, like, I'm going to go get those resources. Like, I'm going to finagle my mechs. I'm going to position myself, and, like, it totally plays into my strategy. Like, I never produce excess resources. I know exactly how many resources I need to accomplish the things on my board, and when I get a resource, I spend it. So I don't expose myself, and I'm constantly watching for people leaving those tasty free resources around.
And the other thing that I started to learn the more times we played is there's all kinds of unique abilities that really, you don't catch on until you've either played different factions or one of those factions has it and basically screws you over with it, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all these things where like, oh, I can, once I control a mountain, I can move to any mountain or this or that, or move to these different lakes. There's all these different movement abilities that they have that if you're not aware of, and you're like, oh, I'm safe over here next to this lake because no one can touch me. And then Chimera or somebody else gets that lake movement, they can just pop right in and take all your stuff. So it becomes this, for me, this board game is like the epic turtle game, which I kind of like, right? It's like, I'm going to like hold up and like just protect myself and like do all the things to like try and win, right? Build my popularity to do this. And I don't want to engage with anyone anymore. I just want to make sure no one's hitting me so I can like make my country awesome and like have enough backup power that it's like, I want my mechs in position so like people really have to think twice before attacking me.
Yeah, like Tom said, combat is not the central mechanic. And after the first like time I've taught the game, or first couple times I taught the game, it's something that I try to emphasize a little bit more when we start playing it. That it's like the whole idea with these mechs isn't necessarily to fight, because while you can do that and it can be somewhat successful, it is not the main focus of what you should be trying to do within the game. I think, though, a key combat at the right time, like even if someone doesn't leave resources unprotected, if they have a lot of resources in one spot and you can attack and take those resources and then use them, like there is nothing that jumps you up whatever it is that you're trying to do and completely stymies or knocks down your opponent. Because that's something that they could have been building up to, even if they had it protected for a round or two, that was going to be this big payoff, and now it sets them back like those 3 rounds, and they have to go back to the drawing board. It's not necessarily that it's going to completely crush your game, and if it did crush your game, you really made a mistake strategically, but it's going to set you back, and it's going to be frustrating because that is for sure what it will do.
And it's, I think, another key thing too with like the mechs, and also it's just how the combat plays out, right? So this isn't, normally when I think of mech combat or really combat in any game, right? You guys start talking, and if you don't explain the game, I'm going to think we're rolling dice, right? Mm-hmm. Are we rolling dice, or is there like a card mechanic where like I have special abilities and like there's strategy to that? The way that the combat works here is like you're gaining a resource called power, right? And you basically, if I have 7, you can bid a max of 7 power every time you go into combat. And then you have these combat cards, which have anywhere from like 2 to 5 power associated with them. right? And certain factions have the ability like to play multiple combat cards. Certain factions have abilities that like, you know, can do, like I said, artillery to lower the other opponent's power. But you have to really look at like, oh, if I'm going to go attack Tom, he's got a power of 2, right? But he's got this faction and you might have a ton of combat cards. So if he has a 5 and his max is 2, his max is 7, right? So you're playing this number game. So if you have a lot of power and someone else has a lot of power, it actually kind of like makes it this really tough decision to say, do I want to attack them? Right? And are they, and like, if I attack them, are they going to ramp up all their power to try and defend and win? Are they going to say, nope, don't care. I'm going to put it at 1 so I get my combat card and you can take that territory? And like, oh, are they going to do that? Do I want to waste all my power? Because I think that they're going to like not do that. So there's like almost like a bluff poker-esque aspect to it. And like, it's a different way to think about combat. It just makes me way more apprehensive to get into combat because I don't want to like, and I'm probably, you know, we can never play this game again because now I'm telling you all my strategy and how I feel about it. But like, I don't like to like, then like, sweet, I took this territory, I wasted all my power, and now I'm vulnerable to everybody else, right? And you can mitigate that, right, by having strategies like, you know, again, to raise your power really quickly again, or like whatever I'm attacking is really what I needed to move forward. But it adds a different element that is so different from what I normally think about mech combat, because I would normally think it would be more like, hey, this is Armored Core the board game, and I have a handful of like missile cards, and I'm just going to decide what type of thing I'm going to do to blow you up. It's just a different mechanic.
Yeah, like nothing stings more than, you know, you bid 7 of your power and you have like a 4 or 5 combat card, and then they basically just put 1 power in and it's like 2 power, so you beat them like 12-2, and you're just like, I wasted all of that. Like that definitely feels like a kick in the pants, but it's also one of those things where it's like, well, this is what I needed to do to make sure that I fulfilled this part of my plan, and you know, hopefully you were already planning for that to rebuild your power after that, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting risk reward because the way that you win in Scythe, you get a star for accomplishing different things, and winning a combat is one of those things, but you can also get a star by having 16 combat power. So if you're in, say, the low teens with your combat power and somebody fights you, it's like, are you really going to defend your territory? Are you really going to push that victory knowing that you could lose, potentially gain a star for winning a combat? That's good, but potentially lose a star, because if you drop from 13 combat power down to 6, it's unlikely that you're going to make up that gap for the rest of the game.
Yep, and if you are... If you're one of the, if you're all but one of the factions, you can only get 2 stars by winning combat. So winning any more than that is superfluous unless you are Saxony, I believe it is the one that can win. They, for every fight that they win, they get stars. So that's another aspect of it to keep in mind, so that you don't just think, well, I'm just going to fight, and I'll get all my stars that way.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I actively avoid combat in this game. I don't generally want to spend that combat power to earn the star. Like, I like to try to earn all the other stars, and if I get my star for combat power, then I'll look to engage in combat. But I was playing as Saxony with John the other night, and like, they're the faction that you can get unlimited stars from combat, and like, my engine was just broken and things were not going well. I was like, well, there's these 2 factions with a couple of territories that just don't have any combat power. I can math my way through this, and I thought that I stole a stealth victory in the game by getting 5 stars over 2 turns through 3 combats and 2 secret objectives. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't expect to win this game, but great. And John, how did you end up beating me on it?
Popularity, right? It was all popularity. Like, my engine was like, I'm just going to sit around and do nothing, right? But I'm going to make my people happy. And, you know, I had all kinds of things that were boosting my popularity, and it literally came down to, I had moved into 1 extra territory, right? Because as part of my plan, and just when Tom did it, I had 1 more land than Tom, but that popularity, or not 1 more land than him, but like that 1 land plus my popularity multiplier bumped me ahead of Tom, right? So it's a really interesting game. I think like as the more I played it, like the digital, and we can talk about digital stuff too as we move forward, like the digital aspect of it, like to be able to kind of see where your score is, helps you kind of plan that sort of stuff out. So that is really cool, like how the popularity aspect let me win, even though, like, you know, I wasn't done with my end game either, right? Tom ended stuff early, and I was like, shoot, I didn't get to like complete what I was doing for victory, right? But I had enough popularity to eke out the win.
Yeah,
I think with the digital version, mechs also end up being a benchmark. One of the benchmarks. It's one of the main benchmarks to gauge, to see how well you're keeping up with other players. So because like trying to look at what other people have, you have to like sort of dig into a menu or two to sort of see that. And learn how to like understand the iconography of the digital edition to really get a grasp on that. But otherwise, if you're sitting there, it's like I have one mech and I look around and I see that, oh, okay, this person right next to me has 3 mechs. All right, well, so they're about to finish that sort of part of their tech tree, and they also have probably at least the +1 move ability. They have Riverwalk. So it's like it's an easy, quick way to sort of gauge where technologically some of the factions are at. And it's much more visible than a lot of the other elements in the game. Like monuments you can see on the board, but those are maybe those are something that aren't as important to be paying attention to, because it's just sort of passive benefits that it gives the users or the other players when they're putting those out. But seeing that they have those mechs really sort of is like, okay, I got to try to keep up with this. It gets into that Cold War mentality a little bit, where it's like, okay, I got to get my arsenal up to the same level, otherwise I'm going to be a target, right? So I think that's another one in the digital version, especially, that's more apparent to sort of get a gauge as to where the other players are.
Now, one thing about the digital version that I think is both a strength and a detriment is it is very, very fast. When you're playing the hard copy of Scythe, and like you're looking at the table, you're waiting for everyone's turn, and like you can see what's going on, and like you can think about what's happening. In the digital edition, we never played with 5 players. The most we played with was 3 players and 2 bots, and like those bot turns are just boop, boop, done. So the other night, when John and I were playing with 3 other bots, it's like he'd act, I'd have my thing queued up, and then boop, 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 right back to John. It's like, oh, I have no awareness of really what's happening around me. It's like I know what I want to accomplish, and I know what I want to do that, but like I don't have any reaction to other players other than, oh crap, you attacked me. Now I'm mad and I have to retaliate.
Yeah, and the computer doesn't like say what they're doing. You kind of see it on screen a little bit, but again, it goes so fast. It's way different than when you're playing with your buddies and they're like, ha, and like there's that moment where like, ha, I got the thing I wanted, and you're seeing them just move the piece physically with their hand over, and you're like, okay, I see that, Tom just moved his max, or that Joey just built his, windmill or whatever it is. You just kind of see that, and it goes so quick, right? You just lose a little bit of that, like, the person's not attached to it, and I think that's the key, right? Like, and maybe like we should just start naming the bots, like Jerk 1, Jerk 2, like Jerk 2 always does this or something, right? Because there is that level of like, oh, okay, I see what Joey's doing, I see what Tom is doing, I see what John's doing, and you can attach that movement to the person. And in my brain, at least, there's like a little ticker. I'm like, okay, I kind of understand what each person is doing here, and I might be able to like adjust my strategy, and I don't get that when I'm playing against a computer.
Yeah, and there's a setting in the game that's on by default where when a player does something, the camera like moves and focuses on what's going on. And while it's nice from a visibility standpoint, it really makes the game pretty nigh on like impossible to play, because you're in the middle of trying to look at what you're going to do on your next turn, and then the screen shoves away and is locked into the animation of whatever they're doing. And then, so it's like, what'll happen is it's like, oh, okay, I went, then I'm looking at what I'm going to do next turn, making sure I know that I can do the 2 things I want to do. And then, the computer goes and it snaps over to them. And it's like 15 seconds. I'm locked in the animation of what they're doing. And so then it's like, oh, okay, I got control back. All right, get reoriented. What was I looking at again? Oh, Tom just went. And now it snaps over there. So you probably want to shut that off in the settings. And the good thing that you can at least do is there's like a cue on the left side of the screen that you can see what the different factions did with their 2 turns. You have to get really good at reading the iconography that's both in the board game and then how they represent that in the digital version. So, it takes a few playthroughs to really understand what that is. and to sort of at least find out or recognize what it is that you're looking for that you should be concerned about. Because there are things that are important to know, like what your neighbors have upgraded or not, so that if you do your recruits, which give you benefits whenever the people on either side of you around the digital table do something, you don't want to maybe prioritize something that they've already researched a couple of times. You want to do something that they haven't really gotten into yet that you think that they're going to need to do a lot. And so that's also one of those instances where it's important to sort of see what it is that they have done. And then if you hover over their token, it'll show you like the level of advancement that they've kind of made on their boards and what their boards are, which represents you like looking over their shoulder at the table or standing up and leaning across the table to see, what the person on the other side has done. But it's tricky to sort of process what all of that is just by looking at it in the short amount of time that you have.
Yeah, I couldn't grok that in fullness, so I basically ignored that chart on the left. It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna do my own thing, and we'll see what the board looks like when it comes back to my turn. I kind of led us down a path to talk about our overall thoughts of the games. There are just a couple more mech-related things that I want to touch on before we move on. Each faction has unique mech abilities, and I want to talk about how they shaped our approach to movement, combat, and resource control.
Yeah, so I'll tell you one thing. Something that like really kind of hampered me in one game and almost caused me to lose the game that I won. You really need to remember which tiles you can river walk between with your mechs, because there is nothing more frustrating than like, why can't I move these people to this spot? What in the heck? And then it's like you finally look back at that ability. It's like, oh, I can only go from tundra to forest. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, and let's set that up just a touch more. Like, each faction has a starting area, and you're generally like walled in by rivers. So you're stuck in your tiny little area until you buy a mech, and then you have 4 abilities that you choose from, and one of them is a river walking ability that allows you to move. And there's 5 different types of terrain in the game that generate different types of resources. And each faction has a unique river walking thing. So like, I can't tell you what each one does other than like, I think it's Saxony can go from mountains to any terrain.
Yeah,
you're right. That is really important to keep track of, because like, if you're stuck on your island, you're not going to accomplish very much.
And and it is balanced to be based on what your starting area is. Can you river walk to a couple of the spaces? For me, it was frustrating because the space I wanted to go to wasn't one of those spaces. So then it's like, oh, okay, I got to like meander around and do a couple movements around to be able to get to where I was at. Yeah, because the last couple times I played, I was Crimea. And so, when we're looking at the specific mech abilities, that's one thing that's specific. And then there's one other one that tends to be much more unique to the faction. For like a movement ability. And so for Crimea's was basically you could jump to the starting point. So it's like wherever the faction symbol is for a faction that's not being played. And I felt that one was for the most part useless. I guess it maybe would have been useful in a couple of instances to try to get at encounter tiles. But other than that, it's like, it's just taking me out to Timbuktu and not towards the factory or towards like resources that I really want to try to get at. So that didn't feel as useful as like +1 movement and river walk, which are like the first 2 that you're going to unlock with your mech.
Well, John, that actually would have been a benefit for you in the last game that we played. Like, what were you trying to do out in those remote areas?
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing, right? So in the last game we played, I actually was like, I use tunnels. So that's another key thing is like there's this movement mechanic in the game where there's tunnels sporadically around the board. And if you are on a tunnel tile, you can go to any other tunnel tile, right? And that can make you really vulnerable, right? Because anybody can get to you really easy. But I was like, oh, I don't want to go, like, fine, I'll protect the tunneled area, but I want to get to the other territories that are in the corner outside the tunneled area because my movement progression was going to move my guys because I had a challenge to like basically have a worker on every single type of resource, right? Oil, iron, all that sort of stuff, wood, food, and I think that's all of them. But so I was basically, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to jump here because no one's there, right? I don't have to worry about being attacked except from that tunnel area. So that would be even better if I would have been able to just jump to the token that's even further away and further away from the tunnel. So to me, it's one of those things where if I have resources, right, that I need that I can't get to with my mech, I would love that ability because I could just say, and I'm going to yoink right over to like another starting area where no one's going to right away. So that would be an easy way for me to say, I need iron. I don't have any iron or metal. So, but it's over here. Let me just loop over here and grab it.
Yeah. So, John, you're very smart. That was a great strategy. For me, like, I didn't super prioritize the mechs. If they were cheap for me to produce and I happened to be standing on steel with one of my starting tiles, like, great, I'll get my mechs out right away. Otherwise, like, I would get a mech to get out of my starting area, and that I'd prioritize that, and then I'd kind of see how the resources unfolded. Whenever I could get the most plentifully, I'd get my workers on first and try to get all of that bought, and then I'd just sweep up all my workers in one big move, drop them on another resource, produce, and be like, all right, now I got all my food. Then move over to the forest. Good, now I got all my wood. Let's upgrade our buildings.
I think for me, right, it's really faction dependent, right? And like the timing is going to choose what I pick, right? So, you know, I've had, you know, again, like, so I may have my resources spun up so that I can build quickly and you can build yourself a tunnel. So look, I don't need the mech movement because I'm going to use tunnels to get out and about. So then by the time I'm ready to build my mech, well, now I'm in combat phase, or now I just want the extra movement. So I choose my mech ability based upon when I'm launching my mechs, right? And because like that last game, that one I was just talking about with Tom, like I didn't have any metal in my spot, right? Mechs were the last thing I did because it was going to cost me 4 metal to build a mech. I didn't have any metal in my starting area. So I focused on like building up all kinds of other stuff. Like mechs were like an afterthought for me until finally like I got some guys to an area and I had upgraded the cost of my mechs down to like 2 iron or 2 metal. So now it was affordable and now I could create them quickly. But by then I was already expanded out on the map. So like I'm not going to get the river walk ability, right? Because I don't need it, right? So I'm going to get speed. So you get +1 to all movement to make movement more powerful or whatever I would need at that time.
Yeah, so but it's like unless you build your mine so that you can get to the tunnels, you know, so that is a way around it. But if you don't have that, you don't have a mechanism to get out of like your little 3-zone starting area. And if you don't have certain materials within there, it makes it much more difficult to do different things. And so and this is kind of bleeding over into like the next topic that we had. So it's not just like your faction, but it's also then the random sort of, I don't remember what it's called, but the other tile that you get. So if like you're an agricultural society or, you know, whatever, and that determines how expensive it is to upgrade those main sort of upgrade paths. So for instance, if your mech is only 2 metal to make, and what I've found in general is, you know, when we're comparing this to the other game elements, I think the most important thing to focus on upgrading are whatever are the cheapest for you. And especially if you can get to those in your sort of 3-zone starting area within the river, then you're like super golden. Otherwise, if not, you need to find whatever way you can to get metal so that you can get Riverwalk to get to those tiles so that you can try to max out whatever those upgrades are. And, you know, depending upon which one it is going to make it easier for you to get to upgrading some of the other ones that are more expensive that cost maybe 4 resources instead of just 2. And so I think that ends up being, from my calculus, much more important than a lot of things. But it is also important to notice what your faction abilities are and how those will benefit you in trying to accomplish those sort of upgrading goals within your engine.
So as you're trying to upgrade your engine and pursue those stars for victory and boost your popularity to boost your victory points, how do mechs compare with the other game elements? Like, your worker placement or your hero figures or the structures that you build, how do mechs compare to those other elements in terms of strategic importance?
So like those other areas to me, they're all about maximizing your turn options, right? Everything about this game is like, you get your top action, bottom action, and how do I like say I want to always be doing as much as I can every turn, right? And to me, mechs just make more options available, right? So that's the biggest thing when I'm looking at mechs is like the mechs are equally important, but they could also like be not even a part of your strategy, all dependent upon your faction and then your play mat. That's the thing Joy was talking about, like how you can do things in your resource upgrade path. So it's a cool thing to where like, oh, this game I have to get my mechs out because I need the movement. Yep, it's critical. I will not win unless I do it. Hey, this game, the way I have it, mechs aren't as important, and I will get them out maybe as that combat deterrent like we talked about later. Like that's when it becomes more of a deterrent, like midway through, because I see what Tom is doing or what Joey's doing or the computer's doing, right? So it really does vary game to game, but to me it's just knowing what options my mechs will bring to the table, because it's different for every faction, so that I can make sure that I prioritize getting that out into like my entire game plan.
Yeah, I mean, my hot take is that the most important game element is the one that's cheapest and quickest for you to max out, given the player mat you have. And if it's kind of close between them, then it's whichever one synergizes with your faction's abilities or your faction's starting zone. But that's ultimately what I think is going to be the most important to the game you're playing. I think the joy of Scythe is that that's randomized every time you play. Or it can be randomized. It can also, I think there's like a mechanism where you could like draft them basically, and you determine who gets it first, and then it goes around. And once you get expansions, you get extras. I think you get extras of the play mats, or player mats. And so, there's more usually than the amount of players. And so I think that ends up being what's more important. And so depending upon the game, it's going to be a different one. Sure, like upgrading, so what you spend oil to do makes things cheaper to do and makes you do more of your top actions. But if it's 4 oil to do that, that's not as important as maybe building monuments, which, if that's only 2 wood and you have ready access to wood within your starting area, then you can build your mine. You don't have to worry about Riverwalk at that point, and you can just go out to the tunnels and move around that way. And so, yeah, I think it really depends upon what's easiest for you to be able to upgrade. And hopefully that synergizes really well with what your faction tries to do.
I think it's so interesting that for a game with mechs on the box, with cool miniature figures of mechs, like, you're not shooting missiles. Like, they don't even have to be a core part of your strategy. They can be very useful. Mm-hmm. They can be a part of your strategy, but everything in Scythe is so fluid. It's like, it's so reactionary and so based on what you can do efficiently. I think it's, to answer my own question, mechs they can be as important as the other elements in terms of strategic importance, but they can also be de-emphasized. It all depends. Everything depends. Yeah, there's no hot take. It's just like, well, maybe they'll be important. Scythe, good stuff. We're going to take a quick break for a note from our sponsor, Premier Health.
So I've been falling down a rabbit hole recently of getting into a bunch of games on my phone and really sort of putting in a lot of time playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, and Path to Nowhere, which is like a gacha game that I play on there that has like lots of combat and things like that. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm on my phone and I'm searching around, like reading news, which, that doesn't help my blood pressure either these days. But what I found is, you hold your phone in one hand, everybody could hold it in whichever hand it is. But I have some pretty serious thumb problems from repetitive stress injuries of, because the phones, as they get bigger, it's that much harder anatomically. That didn't feel good either. It's that much harder anatomically to move your thumb around. And so my thumb's stuck. It's sore. It doesn't feel good when I move it around. Who can help me with that?
You should check out Premier Health. They have solutions for back pain, neck pain, car accident injuries, thumb phone related stuff, and more. We suggest seeing Dr. Brian Camille in Golden Valley, Minnesota, or Dr. Kelsey Camille in Coon Rapids. Learn more at premierhealthmn.com. That's premierhealthmn as in Minnesota.com. Now we're going to move on from mech focused discussions to talking about the overall digital board game experience. So how does Scythe, the digital version, compare to the physical board game? Burns, you introduced me to Scythe. It was my favorite game going into this podcast. Like, how do the two versions compare?
I mean, for me, nothing really replaces the tabletop experience. I think the original experience is far better at being able to track the overall game state because it isn't buried underneath menus or having to hover somewhere to look at it. And, you know, granted, I feel like an in-person game's always going to take longer than playing one online, even if I think we had all human players online. I think it would be quite a bit faster to play it digitally, but it's like I have like all the upgraded components and stuff like that. So like the tactile feel of Scythe has always been something that's been great. And so, you know, if I had the choice and it was basically like, hey, could everybody relatively easily come over to my place and I have it set up and we play, or we could just play online, I would try to push things towards if everybody could coming over and playing in person.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played the physical version, so I'm biased, I guess. But I think once you know the game, right, I think the digital version's fantastic. Like, to all the points Joey just had about you can't really find things or see things, right? Even you guys knowing the game coming in were frustrated because you're like, what is this thing? Or I can't find this thing, or this is like in a different icon. Like, I do think though, I will always go physical over digital from just that aspect of like, yeah, like I would never say like, hey, if the five of us got together or the three of us and like we had two more people, like, are we all going to bring laptops and play it? Like, right. Like, no, we're not just going to like LAN party a board game. Right. I would do the version, but like, it would be cool. Like, even though like, you know, all right, I'm in Indiana and you guys have 3-4 guys in, you know, Minnesota, and you guys might all be local, but we could all still play side together because we could jump on. So I think it's an awesome way to still get most of the experience you would get.
Yeah, I really hated it at first. Like, the first time I logged in, like, I'm like, this looks like crap. I'm super frustrated. I don't know how things work. And I played a solo game before we first played together. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a rough show. I'm going to be very, very negative. I had to do the tutorials just to learn basic things. Like, in the board game, you know, your mechs move your workers. So you just like, if you want to move your workers and you have a mech there, you just scoop them all up, put them where they're going. Pretty easy, right? I couldn't figure out how to do that in the board game. I'm like, I know that mechs can pick up workers, and my workers need to go from this tile. They don't need to be on this town tile anymore. They need to be on this wood tile so I can build my stuff. And it's like, I don't know how to do this. I'm like, I don't know how to pick up my resources, so they're just sitting there for anyone to scoop up, and it was super duper frustrating. But after going through the tutorials, I'm like, I really warmed up to the digital version. And the thing that I appreciate most about the digital version, playing against bots, I really learned how to effectively play Scythe. Because, like, as great as the game is, when your buddies only get together every couple of months for board games and you play Scythe maybe once a year, like, they're not always the best competition. You don't always get, like, ways to optimize. And, like, with this digital version being so quick, like, I could play a solo game in 45 minutes to an hour, and it's like, wow, that was awesome. And like, yeah, I'd rather beat Joey and John and other friends. Like, there's much more of a high of beating human opposition, but like, the bots taught me that I was playing the game wrong at first, and it's like, oh, well, now I'm a lot better at it. Like, I'm really excited to crush my friends now.
Yeah,
Tom,
and I think...
Tom, do you remember what I said at the end of my first game?
That you're not going to do the show and that you're probably never playing the digital version again?
No, I didn't say that, but I did say this was by far the most frustrating game of Scythe I've ever played in my life. And it was for a lot of the same reasons. I came in figuring that I had the experience with the board game, so it would be relatively easy onboarding because I had that experience with Gloomhaven when I played the digital version of that compared to the tons of hours that I played that on the tabletop. But it was not the case, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think one thing that would make it easier, right? And for all the digital board game people listening that can take this advice is give me an undo button, right? Like, look, while we're learning, while you're kind of doing it, like there's no undo button. So how many times, like, I don't know how many times like we're playing and, if you're playing with your buddies and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna move this over here and do this, and like, oh, wait, I didn't understand how that worked or this or that. Right, to make it a better experience, most of the time your buddy's like, yeah, just undo it, right, redo. Like, that's fine, you can take that back, that's all right, mulligan it. And there's no mulligan feature, right? Once you click your thing and you're like, oh, I didn't mean to click that, or like, oh no, like sorry, you're done. So that can lead to that frustrating experience completely. I do think though, like, yeah, like especially with a game like the digital version though, like Tom, that aspect of like how many games can you get in, like really help, because like if we would just play this on a board game weekend, we'd do like, unless we're like, we love this and forget every game ever, right? Maybe we'd get 5 games in this or that. Like you may not even get to play all the factions, right? So if we really like, I could see like saying, okay, we're going to be coming into a board game weekend and here's the 5 games we're playing, right? All right. Do they have digital version? Great. I'm going to go buy them for cheap because we got this in you can get this in a Humble Bundle or get it online super cheap, learn the mechanics of the game, so then I can go ahead and play. And like they had great tutorials, so it's almost that level too. Like when you learn a new game, like you got to go watch a YouTube video like 5 times, right? And it does that YouTube video for you, and like you can like make it move really fast, so you like, oh, I got that like that dummy playthrough that you have with your buddies where no one knows what you're doing. You can do that with 5 computers and not have to wait for everybody else to learn it at the same time. So it's a cool aspect that you could like throw into like your gaming group to say, all right, I bought the physical, everybody buy the digital, right? And let's all learn the rules. Let's all learn kind of how it plays. And then, oh yeah, there's going to be that learning curve of like, this looks different in the physical, but that's probably going to be a little bit easier than the learning curve the other way.
2 things on that. First, you could buy the Humble Bundle, or you could just tell your friends about the Humble Bundle and not buy the Humble Bundle, John.
I already had Psy. That's why, right? Am I sad I didn't buy it because now I don't have Wingspan? Yes. Okay, thank you.
The second thing, as difficult as it is when you're going to be playing a new game and you tell your friends, hey, here's a 15-minute YouTube video to watch to show you how to play the game, and then you get to the table and then who all watch the video? One person nods their head.
It's usually me.
Like,
I do it.
Yeah, it is usually you, Tom. And so then it's like, that next step of somebody having to buy a digital version of the board game, like I would love it if people would do that. I feel like that's pie in the sky, or I need your assistance on how to condition my friends better to do the things that I tell them to do, because I don't know that I'd have much success in accomplishing that.
You just need better board game friends. I would watch the video. Right, I would be prepared. Right, you know what? What it really tells me is your friends don't care about winning. That's the difference. Like, look, I would love to be a part of that board game group because your friends don't care about winning. I want to know how this game plays so that when they're trying to figure out how it works, I already know how it works, so I can figure out how to destroy them. That is why you watch the video.
And that's interesting. Like, my take is just slightly different. Like, I love to win, yes, and that's why I watch the video. I'm with you to that point, but like, I want everyone else to like have competence and like be a capable player, because I don't derive much joy if like I'm just stomping everyone because they're a bunch of big dumb idiots. Like I want to beat adequate competition.
I guess. Fine.
I don't even. I guess that's the fun thing. The funny thing about board games, and I know I'm like an outlier on it. I mean, I like to win, sure. But that is definitely not like the main driving force behind it at all for me. For me, a lot of the fun with games, like board games, is sharing that with other people and seeing them like enjoy it. So I really like teaching a new game to people as long as I understand it. Sometimes it's a little difficult when somebody else is supposed to bring the game, and then it's like 5 minutes into them trying to explain it, I have the rule book and I'm explaining it to the group. That's a little bit more hectic.
Any specific examples you want to share of that, Burns?
No, we're good. We'll leave that be for now. So I think just the ability to get around a table and play a game is fun. I'm competitive still, and I want to win if I can. But that necessarily isn't always the driving factor for me. It's just that we had a good experience as a group, and that nobody left the table like with a sour feeling in their mouth. I think that's like sort of like the bigger driving force for me on playing things. But a lot of that then is also why I tend to gravitate more towards cooperative games than competitive games, because I would much rather we work together to win than me trying to stomp you guys to win.
Yeah, no, I want to stomp everyone. So, John, does the PC version make mech-based combat more approachable or more intimidating for new players? As somebody who had never played the physical version of Scythe before, do you think that playing on PC made it easier for you?
I think if you're a board gamer, it does, right? Look, the three of us have played these games before, right? We talked about Brian, friend of the show, Brian was going to be doing this with us, and how difficult it may have been for him to kind of jump in even after going through the tutorials, right? Look, I understand worker placement. I understand a lot of the core game loop mechanics that you're getting with board games. So I can move much quicker with less human interaction for me to learn this, right? I think there's huge benefit if you have green board gamers, right, who haven't played this sort of stuff, to actually have a human person again, you have that mulligan option. You're not worried about a clunky UI or this or that. So I think it's amazing for people who get games, right, and can just jump in and understand the basis of the mechanics. I think it would be hard for someone who's I don't understand, why am I moving this thing around the board, without having a friend there to say, okay, look, what you kind of want to do here is your playmat is more geared towards this. So I'd recommend you go this avenue, and then you can get a mech out, and then give them the hints they need to expand further. And these tutorials aren't going to give you that.
And I'm glad you brought Brian up, because he was supposed to be on this show. And Brian's on a lot of our board game shows because he's kind of our outsider perspective on board games. He does play them, he will play them, but he's not in the culture the same way that Joey and I are. So I really appreciate his outsider perspective. We played this digital version one time without Brian, and I'm like, oh my god, I am not putting him in a position to succeed. This is going to be a clunky, terrible mess. So I tried to set up a one-on-one session where I could just play a two-player game with him and just walk him through the very basics of here's what you're trying to accomplish, here's the tools, here's what all this stuff means. And it's I think you hit the nail on the head, John. For people that play board games, the PC version will make a lot of things a lot easier. But if you're not if you don't own and play a lot of board games in a regular manner, if this show sounds sweet and you want to play Scythe, I'm glad, because it's an awesome game and I love it. But man, it can be just a massively difficult onboarding process.
It's I don't know. It's a weird catch-22 in my mind. I think the digital version is easier. Okay. I think the digital version is easier for new players that haven't played the board game to play than it is for people that have played Scythe to play, because of the mentality that, I don't need to go through these tutorials because I've played the game before. Whereas I think someone coming in completely blind would play the tutorials first and get some of those base mechanics and not bash their head against the screen like Tom and I did the first times that we played the game. So I think that is one aspect of it. I think the other aspect of it is, I don't think, unless they're being pushed by someone who's played and really loves the board game Scythe, I don't see anybody buying the digital version of it unless it's I don't know of anybody that would be like, oh, I've randomly seen this Scythe board game in like the game store before. I'm going to spend $20 on Steam and buy this digital version. That has to be such a small population of people. And so it's like, I don't know people that haven't played it that would actually like seek it out unless it was like, oh, hey, 4 of us have already played it. Let's get John to play it. So just buy this on this Humble Bundle or not, and then we'll play, you know, a couple times over the next few weeks. So that's like the weird double-edged sword of it, because I don't know that someone's going to become a Scythe fan completely out of the blue and by playing this game. So it's this weird thing with the game. Then it's like, who is it for? I feel like it's for people that love playing Scythe and can't get enough of it, and they just want to play over and over and over again because they can't get it to the table that many times.
The way you're talking, like, it's interesting. Like, what it reminds me of is this, like, you know, people who love chess, right, will go and they will play online chess. Right, with bots and this and that, right, and they will play like these super, super difficult bots so that they can get quick games, right? Bam, 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 bam. So there is that mechanic too of like, I just really love this game and I want to play it, and like, you probably won't see the person who like kind of knows the rules of chess, right, and likes playing every once in a while, jumping on to play like the digital version of chess. Like, you have to have that desire. So yeah, it probably is like, it would like, to bring Brian in, it would never be something Brian would like actively go and find and buy. So it's really not designed for people like that, because really, like, also the physical version of the game is not something that sort of individual would go buy. So to me, like, when you look at these digital games and these big complex ones, it's like, oh, have you played the big box version or have a desire to because you're in that space? Yes, then you would be happy picking this up to give it a try. Which, it's also kind of fun to think about too, of like, you know, some of these games are $80, right? $100. Like we're like Gloomhaven, right? And like, I have the digital version of Gloomhaven and it cost me $15. So like, it does get you a little bit also of like, I can try before I buy. Do I like the mechanics of this game? Right? Or like, is my game group going to like the mechanics of this game? Right? So there's that aspect of it too that's really kind of cool when you think about digital board games and how they're implemented.
Scythe just needs its Queen's Gambit moment. So they need to make a Netflix movie with Anya Taylor-Joy as the gal with the bear. And then everybody's going to want to play it online, just like with chess, right? That's like the only reason I started playing chess online, and I lost like 20 games in a row, and I've never touched chess again. So,
I mean,
because I was playing against my friends that always play chess, so it was like it's like doomed to failure.
If, you know, Michael Bay wants to put together a sci movie like they did with like Battleship and all those, like when they were like taking properties and making really bad action movies, look, I would love to see a movie in this crazy World War I, like farmer mech, I'm riding giant bears and like turning them into bear meat sandwiches and these encounter cards. I would love to see this movie. I think it would be fantastic in like that like avenue. So I'm all for it. The movie. That's what I want.
We need to write it. If we write it and we can just like, you know, pitch it to Jamie Stegmaier, Stonemaier Games, he can create Stonemaier Pictures. You know, I mean, he's got to be sitting on buttloads of cash that he just wants to like burn on something that's going to like lose money, right?
Great solution, Burns. So the last question that I have for you guys: are digital adaptations of board games a reasonable facsimile of the intended experience?
In today's day and age, yes. Right? Look, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was playing D&D on like Fantasy Grounds, right? So like that was a long, long time ago. Technology's come a long way. Everyone has a webcam. Everyone has a microphone, right? Like, it's really easy to jump in, get this game, get it working, right? It was like, there's no jank, right? We all were able to like jump on into a room together. So it's a great way to get a similar experience. Like, nothing will ever recreate sitting around a table with your buddies. That's never going to happen. That piece isn't, but this is as close as you're going to get. And look, I was telling my wife, like, it's been fantastic playing board games digitally every Thursday night, just saying like, I'm going to go down for a couple hours. We're just going to run through a couple games. We're going to run some Gloomhaven. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, because it's just like that thing that I don't have a gaming group here, so I can get a little bit of that somewhere else. And like the game itself was still fantastic. It's like I have had a lot of fun and learned way more about, like, I would go buy the physical version to be able to play this with a gaming group based upon the fun I've had with the digital version.
Yeah, I the ones that I've played so far fit that role. I think they are good to have. Like I had said before, and like John had said, it's still better to play them in person. But with some different games, it's a little bit different too. There's some people, because I've been looking a lot since we started playing Gloomhaven digital edition. I've been looking a lot like through Reddit and stuff like that on the Gloomhaven Reddit subreddit, and there's people that they've tried to play X amount of campaigns, in person, and they always fizzle out after a couple of scenarios or whatever. But like then the digital version, they've been able to play through the game like 3 times because they can either do it solo or it's just that much easier to get people on there. And digital has always been used to some extent within board game, or not always, but like modernly has been used. Like Tabletop Simulator originally was used to help playtest games that were in development, or as a marketing function to get people excited towards a Kickstarter. And then the pandemic happened, and then Tabletop Simulator was the only way to play board games with your friends, and then it was like around that time was when like the Scythe digital version first came out. Wingspan actually came out shortly after the board game came out, I believe. And so that it started to become more popular now to have these video game adaptations of the board games, or digital adaptations of the board games. I think it's good. I think it's good for the hobby. I'm curious. What I really want to see is I want to see someone do a digital version of Darkest Dungeon, the board game. So then we get into this Inception mode where how deep can we go? Can we get Darkest Dungeon, the board game of the digital board game? And just like how many layers can we go until we eat ourselves like the Ouroboros or whatever? I don't know. But I don't know. So one of my friends has always talked about how the greatest thing that could happen to like Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role playing is VR and AR, and like being able to just put a headset on and you have everything around you, and your friends could be wherever they're at in the world, and you could play that. And while that sounds cool, there's still this part of me that's just like, that completely defeats the purpose of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, the Dungeons and Dragons experience is so much better when it's like personal and it's not just all digital assets. But then again, the most I've played Dungeons and Dragons has been with Roll20 Online. And so it's just the reality of the world that we live in, and the fact that, you don't live by all your friends. And, so yeah, long way to say it. I think they are good.
Yeah, you're right. They are good, and like you guys are both right. It could never replace actually being around a table with your buddies. But for the stage of life that I'm in with 2 young kids, like my schedule is basically work 8 to 5, dad time until bedtime at 7:30. That's done around 8:30 or 9, and then like what's left of the day is like house chores plus gaming time plus like all the recreation stuff. So like for this stage of life, it is awesome to be able to get a game of Scythe in 45 minutes.
What I'm really fascinated about, like with the board game industry moving forward, is with the way that the costs shot up with COVID, and now with increasing tariffs on China, I wonder if you're going to see more board game developers move to making digital games instead that are very board game-esque, just because of the fact that at some point it's going to end up being less costly, or at least your costs are a lot easier to figure out and determine, to just have a digital version of something. Like, will there ever be a world where there is another version of Gloomhaven or Frosthaven that's digital only because it's a little bit quicker using assets that you had before that you could spin up that way, or an expansion that is just for Frosthaven Digital, which they actually just announced. They're starting a closed beta for that. They just announced that a couple days ago, which is interesting and exciting to me too. So I don't know. That's something that I'm really looking at over the next few years as it gets increasingly more expensive to make board games, and there isn't an alternative to China that financially works without like doubling the cost of board games. I mean, they've already gone up in price. Like Gloomhaven was $100 on Kickstarter when I bought it, and Frosthaven at retail is $250 because it's that much more expensive to make and ship a game across the world, and it's a bigger game too, and blah 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 blah. So I don't know. I'm really fascinated to see, depending upon how things change economically, if that's going to sort of drastically affect the industry in that way and push it more digital.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening, and it actually being like, what we've seen with like physical media, and like look like the resurgence of like albums and records, right? To where like, now it's just this niche thing where like you have that core group of like board game nerds that are gonna like, I will spend $300 to buy Gloomhaven. I'm gonna sign up for the Kickstarter, right? It is their hobby, right? It's gonna be like I'm the hardcore board gamer, right? But that will be like you're not making any money with that. Those are the people that are going to build the word of mouth and this and that. And where you're going to make all your money with these games is, hey, we got the really into it community talking about whatever X game is, and here's the digital version that you can buy for $20, right? And like so there'll be this whole new machine where they're going to we need to generate interest. Well, we need to still have this big box and this big release to get the core group to talk about it. And then they will also buy the digital. And then that will then say, oh, and then everybody will buy the digital. Right. And that's how we're making our money on the back end.
Yeah. And, sort of taking that to the next level. And I know we're getting off topic and we probably should stop, but it's going to be really interesting with tariffs also to see if that ends up being the final nail in the coffin of physical media for video games, and stuff like that, because, digital isn't going to have an increased cost because of tariffs, but physical is. And so I don't know, that's another thing that I'm super curious about is, the games already, when they jumped from $60 to $70 as the standard price, if because it's being shipped from overseas, it's going to be $80, $85, $90, but you can still buy it for $70 on digital. Do people just buy digital? Does that negate the drawbacks that people are continually having with, oh, I bought this game on this niche digital storefront, and now that digital storefront closed down and I no longer have access to the game because you don't own the game. You have a license to the game. I think that will just get washed to the side unless there's a big player, like if Epic somehow went out of business and all those free games you got from the Epic Game Store no longer work. That would be the only thing that would maybe really raise the caution flags and maybe make it justified to buy the physical version of a game. So I don't know. It's just all of this is kind of more of just a brave new world, what's going to happen, and how do you make the economics of something work? What price is too much for a board game, a video game, and how do you recoup that cost if you can't raise the price? I don't know. It's really weird times for these hobbies that we talk about on this podcast so much, and so we'll just have to see how it all plays out, I guess.
Yeah, well, you did fix the monetization issue in board games, so that's good. All digital for the rest of our lives. That's going to wrap up our discussion on Scythe, the digital edition. For the next 2 months, our game club is continuing our mech and digital board game themes. We're wrapping up our Armored Core discussion in mid-April, and then we're going to break down the digital edition of Gloomhaven in mid-May and maybe June. Next month on the main show, we're doing our annual director episode on Doug Liman, who directed Swingers, Born Identity, and The Edge of Tomorrow. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening. Please review us on your favorite podcast platform and consider supporting our show on Patreon at patreon.com/OIO. For John Munch and at HobbyBoxBurns, I'm Tom Sidlogic at Tom Sidlogic OIO. We'll talk to you next month. Stay inside, kids.